Jesus said that in the end times, very few people would be received into heaven when he returns. And the reason? Lawlessness. But how does that align with there being over 2 billion Christians alive today? And what law of God is being consistently ignored by almost everyone? So much so that Jesus will be saying, "I never knew you. Depart from me, you workers of lawlessness." Let's talk about the Sabbath. Thanks for watching this video. Remember to like it, subscribe to the channel, and please consider donating in the link below if you want to see many more of these videos. They're very expensive to make, and we would love to make more for you. All right, God bless.
In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth.
If you believe in God or just picked up a Bible at some point, you're probably familiar with those opening chapters in Genesis, the first book of the Bible. It's where God creates the world in 6 days. But on the 7th day, something happens. So God blessed the 7th day and made it holy, because on it, God rested from all his work that he had done in creation. After creation, the 7th day is called the Sabbath or God's Sabbath. In the 10 Commandments, the Sabbath is the 4th commandment. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work. But the 7th day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea and all that is in them, and rested on the 7th day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. This commandment, written by God himself on tablets of stone, was never revoked or altered by God, his son Jesus, or the apostles. Jesus kept the Sabbath and even declared the Son of Man is Lord of the Sabbath. But today, 98% of Christians could care less about the Sabbath and instead observe Sunday, the first day of the week, as a holy day. So, what happened?
SA975 has been delayed.
The word Sabbath comes from the Hebrew word Shabbat, which means to cease or to rest. God rested on the 7th day, blessed it, and he made it holy, creating the Sabbath, which we now observe weekly as Saturday. The Sabbath begins at Friday sunset and ends at Saturday sunset, the 7th day of the week. It starts at sunset because it follows the biblical sunset to sunset cycle, unlike today's Roman system, where a day begins at midnight. In the Old Testament, God repeatedly tells his people that keeping the Sabbath is a sign between him and his people, a sign that they worship the one true God. Why? Because it points back to creation. Jesus, our example, consistently kept the Sabbath. 35 to 40% of the events recorded in the Gospels involve the Sabbath or are set on the Sabbath. Obviously, the apostles kept the Sabbath. Acts 13, 16, 17, and 18 are a few examples that show them observing it long after the resurrection of Jesus. But why do I emphasize after the resurrection? Many believe that the resurrection of Jesus Christ actually canceled the 4th commandment, claiming that Jesus somehow became the Sabbath. But we'll get back to that later in this episode. Let's find out exactly what made the Christian world abandon God's Sabbath. A key question we need to ask first though, is it even possible for Christianity to drift away from God's commandments and the example of Jesus? Not only is it possible, we are even warned about it again and again in the New Testament. Paul, Peter, John, and Jude all warned against false teachings infiltrating the early Christian communities, just decades after Christ walked the earth. Paul warned the Galatians about turning to another gospel. Peter spoke of false teachers introducing destructive heresies. John advised testing the spirits because many false prophets have gone out in the world. And Jude urged believers to contend for the faith against those distorting the truth. If deception and false teachings were already a major problem in their time, imagine how much more integrated it could be today, nearly 2,000 years later. When faced with theological dilemmas today, such as the Sabbath, the scholars of the Christian world often turn to sources like the so-called Church Fathers, referring to the Christian leaders of the first centuries. But here's the problem. Even though these figures lived relatively close to the time of Jesus, major theological changes had already taken place in the early Christian church. Two of the more famous examples are Ignatius of Antioch and Justin Martyr. They were actually among those who began distancing Christianity from Judaism, which then was banned in the Roman Empire. Ignatius of Antioch was one of the first to argue that Christians should move away from observing the Sabbath and instead embrace Sunday, the Lord's Day. In his first epistle to the Magnesians, he wrote, "Let us therefore no longer keep the Sabbath after the Jewish manner and rejoice in the days of idleness." His attitude towards the Sabbath seems almost aggressive, likely because the Jewish religion was outlawed at that time, and any association with Jews only added to the already intense persecution of the Christian church. Justin Martyr took it a step further. In his first apology, which is like a written defense of Christian teachings, he explained, "Sunday is the day on which we all hold our common assembly, because it is the day on which God made the world, and Jesus Christ our Savior on the same day rose from the dead." Now, Justin argued that Sunday worship was a new creation for Christians, replacing the old Jewish Sabbath. However, the most dramatic shift away from the Sabbath came in the early 4th century from this guy, Emperor Constantine. Emperor Constantine took a step towards transforming early Christianity into a powerful political and religious force, the Roman Catholic Church. In the early 4th century, as the Roman Empire began to fragment, Constantine saw an opportunity to use Christianity as a unifying force and professed to be a Christian. By issuing the Edict of Milan in 313, he legalized Christianity, ending the persecution of Christians. However, Constantine went far beyond legalization. He merged the church with the Roman state, calling the Council of Nicaea in 325. Constantine, a lifelong sun worshipper, recognized the advantage of aligning Christian practices with Roman traditions. Despite declaring Christianity the empire's official religion, he never abandoned his devotion to the sun god, Sol Invictus, the invincible sun. One reason we can say this is that Constantine minted coins featuring the image of the sun god throughout his reign. And this is where we get back to the issue of the Sabbath. On March 7th, 321, Constantine issued a decree saying, "On the venerable day of the sun, let the magistrates and the people residing in the cities rest, and let all workshops be closed." Now, obviously, this was not based on biblical instruction, but it was a political strategy to unify his empire by merging Christian worship with the Roman Day of the Sun, Sunday. Fun fact, even the very name Sunday comes from Greek astrology, where each day was dedicated to a planetary deity, with Sunday honoring the sun god. This shift away from the biblical Sabbath, the seventh day, was further enforced by the Council of Laodicea in 363, which actually declared that Christians must not Judaize by resting on the Sabbath, but should work on Saturday and rest on Sunday instead. And just like that, God's Sabbath was made illegal and replaced by Rome, with the day rooted in sun worship. And we have to be honest with you here. This isn't some hidden secret we've managed to uncover. The Catholic Church has openly shared this information and arguably seems quite proud of it. Here's an example from the Convert's Catechism. The question: which is the Sabbath day? Saturday is the Sabbath day. Why do we observe Sunday instead of Saturday? We observe Sunday instead of Saturday because the Catholic Church in the Council of Laodicea transferred the solemnity from Saturday to Sunday. Here's another example. Sunday is a Catholic institution, and its claims to observance can be defended only on Catholic principles. From the beginning to the end of Scripture, there is not a single passage which warrants the transfer of weekly public worship from the last day of the week to the first day of the week. The Catholic Press, August 25th, 1900. Let's summarize because this is already a lot to take in. God blessed and sanctified the seventh day, establishing the Sabbath. He then inscribed it on tablets of stone as the fourth commandment, the longest and most detailed of the 10 commandments. And of course, we see Jesus and all the apostles faithfully keeping the Sabbath in the New Testament. But today, most Christians do not, and we are beginning to see why that is. The early church wanted to distance itself from Judaism, and as Christianity almost entirely transformed into the Roman Catholic Church, the Sabbath was abandoned in favor of Sunday worship. This move united the Christian part of the Roman Empire with the pagan sun-worshipping culture of that time. At this point, you might be asking, but wasn't Sunday chosen because Jesus was resurrected on that day? Isn't it the Lord's Day? And yes, this is the argument the Catholic Church has used for centuries to justify Sunday. Just like Justin Martyr did 156 AD, that Christ's resurrection on the first day of the week represents a new creation and a new covenant. And although there absolutely is a new covenant, you would think that if Jesus' resurrection actually canceled one of the 10 commandments, this revolutionary shift would be found in the New Testament. In fact, you would expect it to be emphasized repeatedly, as it would represent a monumental change in God's law. A law of which Jesus said, "For truly I say to you, until heaven and earth pass away, not an iota, not a dot, will pass from the law until all is accomplished."
However, nowhere in the Bible does it state that the resurrection nullifies the Sabbath. And why would it? God Himself elevated the seventh day at creation, telling His people that by keeping the Sabbath, they're acknowledging Him as the Creator, the ultimate declaration that He is the one true God.
But we are not done yet. In the last book of the Bible, Revelation, chapter 14 presents one of the most crucial and often overlooked messages for our time, the three angels' messages. But why is this so important? Because these messages include a direct call to the final generation. They have everything to do with God's Sabbath. The first angel says, "Fear God and give Him glory, because the hour of His judgment has come. And worship Him who made heaven and earth, the sea and the springs of water." Does that remind you of the fourth commandment? It should. Only the fourth commandment declares the authority of the one who made the heaven, the earth, the sea, and all that is in them. And another angel, a third, followed them, saying with a loud voice, "If anyone worships the beast and its image and receives a mark on his forehead or on his hand, he also will drink the wine of God's wrath." Those who substitute God's Sabbath with the day of the sun, which will eventually be enforced by law, will receive the mark of the beast. When we say the beast, we mean the Catholic Church, the papacy. Just like the Protestant reformers before us, we use very specific descriptions from the Bible to make that claim. But that's for another episode. Sunday is our mark of authority. The Church is above the Bible, and this transference of Sabbath observance from Saturday to Sunday is a positive proof of that fact. This is not just a struggle over days, but over ultimate allegiance. To the Creator or to the beast. Moreover, I gave them my Sabbaths as a sign between me and them, that they might know that I am the Lord who sanctifies them. If the Sabbath is a commandment of God, how can we justify breaking it to follow a man-made tradition? Matthew 15:9 warns us, "In vain do they worship me, teaching for the doctrines the commandments of men." Will you worship in vain, or will you choose to honor God as He has commanded? This is your moment of decision. It's not just about what the church did centuries ago. It's about what you will do today. God is calling you back to His Word, to His truth. The call is to you, here and now. Seek the truth, study the Scriptures, and let no tradition stand between you and the God who created you.